Hello.
Hi, welcome everybody to the History of Diversity in Comic Books presented by the LGBTQ in partnership with New York Comic Con and the Metaverse. We are so excited to be there. I am Evelyn, also known as Comic Canary. You can find me online at comic_canary on Instagram and Twitter.
Yay.
My name is Indigo, and so I'm the assistant director of Skin Tech USA. We're the event arm of LGBTHQ, and so we, do all sorts of get-togethers and host all sorts of events all along the East Coast and everything. It's kind of slow now, but we're gonna hopefully, be able to start doing some stuff once things start to calm down a little bit. And you can find us at Skin Tech USA on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hello, I'm Raven. How do you do? Local Jill of all trades, nerd, anime, manga, comic books, you name it. I love to do it. I'm also an up-and-coming watercolor artist, and yeah, just like a giant geek all around. I love this. This is making me so happy. You can find me as Dame Red Bento. You just type it in. Trust me, I'm all across social media. Feel free to come and find me.
And I'm Nico Action. You guys can find me hosting my podcasts, X's for Podcast, a twice weekly review of all things going on in the Xverse, as well as HTML, Husbands Talking More or Less, where my husband and I deep read modern popular franchises to find all the great aspects of inclusivity and diversity, or lack thereof.
All right, so we're just going to dive right in. The history of diversity in comics. We are doing a pre-recorded panel that's going to be coming up later where we're going to be talking about disability and race, but this specific conversation is going to be talking about queer and gender identities. The quick history rundown is back in 1954, a Catholic bishop, after a lot of angry moms got angry at comic books for having inappropriate content, or what they deemed inappropriate, created the Comic Book Authority. The comic books themselves decided to regulate themselves before the government can intervene and make it even worse. So part of the authority is they didn't allow for queer content for a very long time. The Code Authority started in 1954 and ran all the way to 1989. And pretty much the only thing that stopped it was DC and Marvel just decided they didn't care anymore. They stopped getting it approved because they wanted to tell these stories that were very important, talking about different diversity subjects, part of that being queer identities and conversations. So we're going to start with our conversation, throwing it out to Indigo, talking about some of the history about transgender and non-binaries that we see in comics, where that started and where that's gotten us today. Take it away.
Yeah, so the history is it's very, I wouldn't say long. It's been around for a lot longer than we anticipated. So it's instead of like, oh, you would think that people only started bringing up transgender characters and non-binary characters only like in the past 20 years, right? Like, no, the concepts of, non-traditional gender identities have been around for decades. You can go back to some of the more problematic ways that they kind of approached it, where basically kind of like having shapeshifters be multiple different genders and kind of just like misunderstanding concepts of gender in that way. We can also go back to, even furthest back to like earlier comics with like Ultra Humanite and how, he put his brain inside of a woman's body. And that was kind of like a weird kind of like man inside a woman's body concept. And that was really the way they only did it back then, was kind of like strict, like, oh, man trying to pass as woman for evil purposes and things like that. Or it was more of like a way to kind of like be an intriguing story concept, like with Sir Tristan in Camelot 3000, or in Legion of Superheroes with, I always mispronounce the name, I even wrote down, Siobhan Eric, and how that character was identified as a woman, but it was only due to a drug that transformed them into a woman. And so it played into kind of the concept of, men just trying to be with straight women, gay men being with straight women in some ways, but it really depends on how you kind of look at those characters. Now, some of them you really can't look at them other than just the way that they were written, like the Ultra Humanite. You can't really say that that's a transgender character, but the Siobhan Eric one is a little bit more, it's less black and white with that one, more in that it was not like, oh, like the character was not trying to, I guess, deceive. They were trying to, I guess, you could argue that they're not trying to deceive, but in other ways you can. So it's like I said, it's not black and white always, but we really only got good characters later on when there was actually people that were, either a trans identity or supported trans rights, trying to write the stories and trying to introduce actual good characters into comic books. Like the latest one is with Alyssa Yeoh from Batgirl. I believe it's Alyssa Yeoh. Yeah, I don't know why I thought it was Allison for a moment. And who came out as transgender in 2013, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. 2013, yes. And so that was an honest to God good representation versus, decades ago. So it's very few and far between, and a lot of times they really focus on trans women characters. We haven't really had many trans male characters, almost, at least not in major comics. You'd have to kind of look at a lot of more independent comics and smaller comic panels for that, unfortunately. And it's mostly focused on trans women characters. And as far as non-binary characters, in some of my research, it was hard for me to find it. I'm gonna, give it to some of you to see if you have any information on that personally. But it's non-binary characters are also few and far between as well. But like I said, the focus is primarily on trans women characters, which is great. It's good to have, representation of trans identity in general, because there is not enough. There's clearly not enough. I mean, for gosh sakes, I only recently learned that Dreamer from Supergirl, the TV show, which came out as transgender. It's because I haven't been watching that show. But I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I was like, please God, let it be a trans actress that's playing her. And it is. I was like, thank God. And so, but it's gotten a lot better, but we still are not nowhere near where we need to be as far as trans representation, for sure.
And I think part of it sources back to the fact that a lot of classic monster movies and horror concepts tie into the idea that so many people were being warned about different kinds of things. Vampires and werewolves each had a representation and each had a meaning. And this idea of stranger in a strange body, the way we've so evolved our fiction, it still kind of lies in those same locations. And I think comics, as a secondary medium in so many ways, not really receiving the main attention, it took longer for it to have the strength and courage in mainstream to break free, even though it's all been there in the underground comic scene for years and years.
And so far, I think I only know of like one non-binary character, and they came out just recently, and they're part of a sibling pair, and that's Safe Space and Snowflake.
I thought you were even going to reference someone else besides those two.
No, okay, well, there are other examples.
In just a second, but to give a little bit more context about the history aspect, Doom Patrol is actually where we have the first non-binary and the first properly done transgender people back in the 80s. First, with transgender, we have Cugula, which is actually created by Rachel Pollack. And she herself is a transgender woman. So she knew exactly what to do. And that's awesome, having a transgender woman writing comics and putting her own narrative in there and giving that perspective, which is fantastic. And then we have Danny the Street, which is literally a sentient street that has the most beautiful non-binary and gender fluid representation I've ever seen. Honestly, one of my favorite panels from him from them, I should say, I apologize, from them, is that they have traditional masculine stores, like gun stores, but in frills and pink and very feminine presenting. And then they have very feminine stores such as bra stores, which are very masculine presenting. And to me, that's a very interesting concept and a way to really portray that. But that being said, we don't really have very many human non-binaries right now. True. And to echo what everyone's been saying, we do need more. But since we did mention some of the more problematic ones that we have had, let's go ahead and transition into the history of just queer narratives in general. We have these modern representations where comic books are trying, but back in the day, the very first mainstream gay character was North Star. We can't do a comic talk without talking about North Star. And then he again was the very first gay man to have a gay wedding in mainstream comics and Marvel Comics. Did anyone want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, well, I guess I could possibly talk a little bit about gay X-Men for a second. I don't know.
Says the person wearing X-Men memorabilia.
Oh, and the shelf. So here's the thing. I love North Star, and he's been through such an impressive transformation.
Yeah.
He started in a lot of ways with some kind of problematic tropey ideas, and at one point he was an actual fairy, and then he was a fairy with a fairy killing disease, and that wasn't great. So when I think about the representation that I grew up with North Star, there's times where I'm left kind of out in the cold, right? A little bit out in the tundra, as it were. But I find that it was done from a place of complex love. It was done from a place where people didn't know how to do better, and they didn't know how to ask for help yet. And the proof lies in North Star's continuing legacy. When I think about the work that Marjorie Liu did by having North Star get married, it probably wasn't the gay marriage I was looking for in X-Men, but it certainly wasn't an unwelcome one. I think the bigger statement and the bigger testament to the development of queer identity in X-Men would be when this guy turned up a little bit gay in the pages of Extreme X-Men, which was spectacular. Wolverine had a mad gay on with Hercules, and how can you not? The both of them. It's just like Bear King versus Bear King. It's just perfect. And X-Men has always had a strong queer advocate in Chris Claremont, who never found a Claremazon he didn't want to gay up. You know what I mean? Whether it was Storm's implicit relationship with Yukio, which is, just that's me scoring a real good basket, right? Or it's Mystique and Destiny, who only finally got to be queer together in the pages of Hoxpox Doxos by Jonathan Hickman, which is House of X, Powers of 10, Dawn of X, 10 of Swords, for those playing at home, with the Hoxpox Doxos of it all. And so I think one of the things is with X-Men, they're always meant to represent freaks already. So it's kind of easier to pile your freak on your freak if you're looking at it from I'm a corporate person kind of point of view. You can just sort of stick your gay in where it's already weird, and no one's going to really look at the gay where it's already weird. I mean, think about how queer Sandman was over at DC in 1989, which was just groundbreaking and legendary and necessary. The evolution of the modern queer identity in comics is so much about finding queers that are already there. They don't need to give us new queers. Deadpool. I am Deadpool to my husband's Cable. That's what we do. It's just what we do.
And just speaking about that, it's so refreshing to be in a generation where it is so accepted. Just look at Hulkling and Wicca finally got married. And the thing that I loved about it is it was not an event. They just did it. And they're like, yeah, it's just two people in love getting married. It wasn't a novelty. Yeah. That's the beauty of it. But look back at the history of Batman and Robin. People were so upset that there were queer undertones with there that they literally had to introduce a female character for him to have a love interest in, just to quash those rumors back in the 50s because of how unaccepted it was back then. And I think it is the greatest plot twist when they reintroduced Kate, that they made her a lesbian. And she would have gotten married if it wasn't for Dan Didio, but Dan Didio doesn't like any marriages, and that's all I'm going to say about Dan Didio. There's some stuff there, but I think that's the greatest and most justice I've ever seen, is the woman who was supposed to help make sure Batman was straight herself became a very out and proud lesbian who now has her own TV show.
They were cousins too, which was just odd to me.
It was
but
retconned as cousins.
Yeah, which I'm glad that they did, so it quashes the ability to go back and, well, no, maybe she was just on fence. Maybe she just need to find the right man. No, they're related. You can just sweep that off the boards, because not gonna happen. But yeah, no, I love Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and I remember way back in the animated series day, I saw the two of them, and I'm like, I don't know why, but I really want them to be together forever. Like, I pegged that was going to happen way back when I was a kid. And now they finally were able to, not only in the comic books, but in the TV show, put them together as a queer couple. And it's complicated. They didn't make it easy. They didn't make it simple. They actually made their entire relationship very complicated, but put in there that communication was the key in order to make that very, very, very complicated relationship work in any capacity, which was great because that's what a real relationship is like: communication, complication, and a whole lot of talking.
That's a great transition to our next topic. We wanted to talk about how pansexuality and bisexuality is starting to become more common in comic books. It's becoming more common in pop culture itself. Look at the show The 100. The main character herself is an out and proud bisexual. But bisexuality has always been kind of frowned upon, where characters that were supposed to be and written with the creators in mind that they were queer, that they were bisexual or pansexual, like Deadpool, like Kitty Pryde, now going as Kate Pryde, where Claremont even said Rachel Summers is the love of her life, and he wanted them to be together in Excalibur but wasn't allowed to. But now, just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, Kate Pryde was finally confirmed as bisexual when
It's gay makeouts.
Yeah, and back in the 80s, she was originally created as that. And I think it's amazing that we can finally have it being so out and proud about it and being very explicitly bisexual and pansexual versus where it had to be only hinted at before and be very vague because it wasn't as acceptable. So there is this modern take on all this queerness that is starting to become that's starting to become normalized, and that's beautiful to me. And the history of queerness in comic books, I'm hoping that, like, my kids, it'll actually be proper history rather than just the last couple of years for us.
Yep. Or that you have to start digging for small nuggets, like in the past, like, oh, was that, is that a hint? I don't know. Maybe we'll put it in the pile.
I grew up Cuban, and not like I traded out at some point and I'm not Cuban anymore, but having grown up Cuban, one of the things that I really connected with was anytime I could find a John Leguizamo special on HBO. If ever a John Leguizamo special came out, I made sure to tape it and watch it 7,000 times and have it memorized because it mattered to me that somebody would, like, Dame las chancletas is like one of the most true to my life things. So for me, I remember him talking about bisexuality and his grandmother saying, bisexuals, pick a hole. And so I thought that I couldn't be, right? I thought that I couldn't be homo-romantic pansexual, which I now am aware that I am as an adult man, but I kind of felt like there was never room for me to be that in the world because that was never okay in anything people saw. And because it was never okay in anything people saw, it couldn't be okay in their real life. What a weirdo you were. So seeing the fact that, not to bring it up again, but the Hoxpox Doc Zos of it all, right? The current X-Men iteration, everybody buy. It's just like bye Birdie. Everyone is looking to get some. And you know what? That's kind of true to the world these days. So many of my friends from high school are like, yeah, I could, if you were single, yeah, if you were single, it could be good. And I'm just like, okay. And like, I'm not like, where was that 10 years ago? You get there when you get there, but people get to get there when they get there. Industries don't. Not when industries are what are supposed to be creating the safe space for people to get there. Art has to take the first step. And I really think that we're approaching somewhere better. I mean, not to bring up a totally different kind of representation, but like I look at what Jessica Cruz represents for the Green Lanterns right now, and I look at what the incredible narrative journey of Kate Pryde, like you just said, we're getting all sorts of dynamic shifts in the hyper-traditional restriction of what a character can be in a way that I think is going to permanently resonate. There are old-time creators, someone maybe robbing out of left field, perhaps, who doesn't want to get on board. And you know what? That's okay, because there's still room for what he's making, but what he's making doesn't mean that we can't make what we're making.
We can always
and
move
Nico,
forward.
That's a great transition for our next topic, which is a brand new history that's only a few years old of now poly relationships. We see it in Red Hood and the Outlaws with Red Hood, Red Arrow, and Starfire, but also something that we were talking about just this morning, the amazing relationship that we just got within the last year of Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. Nico,
finally. Because
Enough with this
Cyclops needs
love
to be
triangle
topped.
bullshit.
Wait, what?
No, for real. Cyclops was tight. So here's the thing. I feel like if we're talking about the way the X-Men are poly, right? I could never understand what it was about the X-Men that it's Jean and Scott never made sense to me. Jean and Logan never made sense to me.
Thank you.
Scott and Logan never made sense to me. Scott, Jean, and Logan. Oh my God, Emma has to be in there. Like, you can't not have Emma. It's upsetting.
Emma Frost needs to be in there somewhere.
And
she's a satellite. She's a satellite.
Like, I understand that there were notions of a rigid sense of kind of almost like binaural audio that like the world had to exist in. You made babies, you stayed with your people, you made a little nuclear family, and you had 2.3 kids and like a half a cat, and you made sure the garbage went out on Tuesdays. But I think something that we forget in an effort to homogenize society to this heteronormative cis existence is that we've sort of declined the notion of clan living and tribe. And the X-Men are at their core tribal and clan at any point. Oh, you're one of the Excalibur, but you're also one of the X-Men. And that's like a thing. Like, your affiliation beep matters, right? So I find myself, I live a poly life, right? I have a husband and we have a boyfriend, and it's the greatest thing in our world, and we all make our shows together, and the whole comic community has actually been really accepting of us. There's never been a time where I felt like my family didn't belong. I have always felt like my family belonged in comics, and now that comics are making room for people that look like my family, good. Fucking time. Like, and if I get to add one more to the list, like, because if I just get to add one more to the list, it would have to be Pete, Wisdom, Megan, and Captain Britain, because it just has to be, and that's that. Yeah. Just give me one more. Just one more.
Honestly, I want Deadpool, Spider-Man, and like one either non-binary or female. Like, I want, because he's so pansexual and so fluid and so very honest with his feelings, that I want him to be in a healthy relationship that has more than one person in it, because I feel he could honestly carry it really, really, really well. And we've seen how attached he is and loving he is with his partners. And I'm like, oh my God, there needs to be super babies in there somewhere. Just, make a super family. Just make it happen, please.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's me. That's me. That's just me.
I think what we can all take out of this is all of us, we are all queer and very proudly queer. And seeing ourselves represented in comic books has not always been there, but we are the lucky ones where our generation, we are living to see this happen. We are living history as it is happening right now. And that's what our organization, the LGBTQ, is all about, as well as our amazing guests. And we just want to create a diverse, safe space in comic conventions and anime conventions where people can be themselves. And the fact that comic books, like Nico was saying, it's starting to represent what we are and including us, makes my heart soar. I will never forget when a child came out to one of our conventions and said that thank you for being here, because comics are finally starting to look like me, and having you guys there, like, I just recently came out and I feel so supported, and I cried. I legitimately cried when that happened. And so that's why diversity is just so incredibly important. I mean, I realize I'm a white woman, but I'm a queer disabled white woman. So I have a little bit less than most people, but I still love seeing that in comics. And so with that, we're about to run out of time. Before we say our goodbyes, I do want to plug, we have, if you want to get involved or just do something really fun, we have the Captain Green Lantern competition. It is October 30th. You can be brand new to cosplay. You can be experienced with cosplay. It's just so much fun. Check out the LGBTQ Facebook page or the website and get all the information. That's how I became involved. Was I got third place, and I'm like, I love these people, and here I am forever.
Yep.
So let's go ahead.
That's how we met.
I am Comic Canary. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at comic_canary. I love cosplay and I love comics, and I'm currently ranting about X of Swords with Nico.
Hell yeah.
Indigo.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Nico. I apologize. Yes,
It's our fault for having similar names.
fair enough. And I'm Indigo. Like I said, you can follow Skin Tight USA's events on both Twitter and Instagram at Skin Tight USA. I'm also on Twitter if you wanted to follow me, Sinestra_righty on Twitter if you want to follow me there. It's
great name.
There it is. I mean, I had to try to be creative with it because I mean, I was like, I'm not going to go with the standard, like weird, like boring.
All right. I'm so sorry. We're running out of time. Raven, real fast.
Hi, Raven, Dame Red Bento. Go ahead and find me on the internets. You know me. I'm just the fun little weirdo who knows a lot of stuff and does way too much baking.
And then Nico.
You guys can find me over on Instagram and Twitter at Nico Action, NICOACTION, or you can look me up on X of Swords at This Is X. Our podcast, This Is X. We're covering X of Swords. I'm good.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Could you have said that shorter?
We're sorry for going a few seconds over time. Please join us on Discord on the Pride Lounge if you have any questions. We're going to be on there for the next couple minutes, for basically a half hour to an hour, answering any questions you might have. Have a fantastic rest of the night and keep watching New York Comic Con. Bye.